Hello from Kampala in Uganda. My name is Becky and I'm excited to be here with you today to share some more thoughts from the Bible. I looked at the calendar today and I couldn't quite believe that we are nearly at the end of June now. This year has simultaneously flown by and also dragged incredibly slowly. It's crazy, really, when you think of how many months now lockdown measures have been in place all around the world for this novel coronavirus. But one thing I think a lot of people have discovered in this time is that it's actually quite difficult. It's quite a challenge to stay healthy in a lockdown situation. I've seen endless jokes flying around the internet about, clothes that have mysteriously shrunk in the months of being stuck at home with free access to any of the food stored in the house. On the compound that I live in here in Kampala, many of the residents have used the extra time that they've had to experiment with some baking, and we've all enjoyed sharing the fruits of their labour. Eating healthily has been a little bit more difficult than normal, I would say. And then on the flip side to that, there are so many people who would absolutely love the incredible luxury of having too much food to eat. There are those who have lost jobs, lost income streams, people who are struggling to survive at all, down to one meal a day, if that. Starvation is a real threat in so many of the countries in the world right now, Uganda included. For all of those people who have suddenly had to cope without any money whatsoever. The food that we put into our bodies, or the lack of it affects us. Too little and we struggle to have enough energy to do anything. We find even simple tasks are difficult. Our minds struggle to focus, and our bodies pay the price. Our muscles start to waste away as the body eats them for nourishment. Too much food, however, and our bodies and our minds become sluggish, and with a lot of excess, we even put our bodies at risk of all sorts of horrendously serious medical conditions, heart disease and stroke and diabetes. I think a lot of us are aware, a little bit at least, of the importance of eating healthily. We think about the food that we're putting into our bodies. But how often do we stop to consider how we might be feeding ourselves spiritually in this lockdown time that we find ourselves in? The Bible describes itself, it talks about itself as being our spiritual food. It's our milk, our bread, our meat, our life-giving water. Starving ourselves of spiritual food, it can leave us just as weak as a lack of real physical food. We don't have our church services or our prayer groups or Bible study groups right now. Those were maybe the regular meals that we used to enjoy. Now we're much more reliant on feeding ourselves with personal Bible study or prayer, or finding good resources to help our spirits to flourish and to remain healthy. It is so important that we don't starve our spiritual beings in this time of lockdown. But we can also end up stuffing ourselves with things that aren't all that healthy. When the COVID-19 crisis started, I found myself checking the news over and over and over again, and just watching the statistics of the number of cases and how many people were catching it today in what countries of the world. It was more than just staying informed. It became a bit of an obsession, I would say. And I was feeding myself more from the media and from Facebook never a particularly good idea, than it was from the Word. We feed our minds and our hearts, our thoughts and our emotions on what we spend the most time looking at and listening to. There is nothing at all wrong with movies and secular music and books. I enjoy all of those things. There's nothing any more wrong with them than there is enjoying the occasional treat to eat as well. But if you're replacing time with God with those things, if they are what you're stuffing yourself with all of the time, then you may find that your spiritual health starts to suffer because of it. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 4, Jesus himself quoted that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. What we are putting into our minds and our hearts is just as important as the food that we are putting into our bodies. It's up to us how we come out of this lockdown situation. We can be spiritually fit and healthy, or we can leave it starved or bloated with unhealthy things. Now, it is never, ever, ever too late to prioritize feeding yourself well from the Bible, and with times of prayer, and with good Bible studies to engage with, and worship songs to lift you. We don't have to live in a spiritual bubble and never allow anything else to cross our paths. But considering what we're putting into ourselves is so very important, especially at this time where those normal sources of spiritual food might be cut off from us. Jesus is the bread of life. In the Bible, he said, "He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst." The more we come to Jesus, the more time we spend in his presence, the more satisfied and complete we will be. I have a challenge for you today, and it's to think, how can you give yourself a good spiritual meal right now? What will you do today to feed yourself, to dig into the bread of life? I bet that you will find yourself spiritually satisfied as soon as you give yourself some time to do that. Thank you so much for joining me here again. It is great to be able to share these thoughts from the Bible with you, and I will see you next time.